Verbal Hypnosis, Speak, Trigger, Influence. Published by Viridian. Chapter 1. There is a moment in every conversation when words stop being mere information and become something else, a lever, a tug, a soft pressure against the door of another person's mind. In that instant, voice, rhythm, and choice of phrase can open the door or slam it shut. This book is about learning to open doors, gently, deliberately, ethically, using the art I call verbal hypnosis. The ability to speak in ways that trigger attention, bypass resistance, and influence behavior without coercion. If that sounds powerful, good. If it sounds dangerous, also good, because power without ethics is a shortcut to harm. We'll talk about both. Verbal hypnosis is not sorcery. It is not mind control. It is language, psychology, and human pattern recognition braided together and used with purpose. It rests on two simple truths. First, human beings are many machines. We take scraps of sound and stitch them into significance. Second, our attention and choices are shaped by patterns, repetition, pacing, suggestion, metaphor, and emotional context. When you understand those patterns, you can design your speech so that your listener's mind follows, not out of surrender, but because the route you invite them to take is easier, clearer, and more resonant than the alternatives. This book will teach you how to speak with that kind of intentional influence. You'll learn how to craft sentences that invite cooperation, phrases that reduce resistance, questions that guide decisions, and rhythms that calm and focus attention. You'll learn practical tools, micro techniques you can practice in real conversations, and bigger frameworks for thinking about persuasion that keep you honest and ethical. Each chapter is a workshop as well as a lesson. Reading is not enough. You must try these things aloud, notice what happens, and refine. You'll get exercises and suggested experiments, but more importantly, you'll get simple principles you can use immediately. Why this matters now. Our lives are threaded with talk. We negotiate, teach, sell comfort, argue, coach, parent, and lead with words. Yet most people stumble through those daily rituals with clumsy, reactive language, interrupting when nervous, arguing when defensive, persuading with logic when the listener needs feeling. Verbal hypnosis is a toolkit for replacing that clumsy reactivity with calm, purposeful speech. It helps you get better results with less friction, to be heard, to be followed, to be trusted. Whether you want to lead a team, close a sale, calm a child's tantrum, or persuade your partner to try a new idea, the patterns you'll learn here will make your words more effective and your relationships more humane. A clear warning before we go further. The techniques in this book are influence tools, and influence can be used for good or ill. I do not teach manipulation that exploits vulnerabilities or lies. Real influence builds alignment. It helps people move toward choices that genuinely benefit them or at least respect their autonomy and dignity. If your instinct is to trick, deceive, or coerce, this book is not for you. If your aim is to communicate more clearly, to help ideas land, and to create situations where cooperation and understanding flourish, then read on. What you will find in the chapters ahead. We begin with the foundations, how attention, language, and physiology interact. You'll see that words don't land in a vacuum. Tone, timing, body language, and context form the runway. Next, we'll explore practical verbal patterns, how to use pacing and leading, embedded suggestions, and carefully structured metaphors that invite the listener's mind to discover your point for itself. We'll study questions that steer without pushing and stories that reshape internal maps. You'll learn how to reduce resistance by aligning language with the listener's needs, and how to manage emotional escalation with calm verbal scaffolding. Later chapters move into applications: negotiation, teaching, coaching, conflict resolution, sales, and leadership. Each application chapter includes scripts you can adapt and exercises that convert theory into habit. This introduction is also where I give you a small experiment to try right now. It's simple, quick, and revealing. Think of a small request you'll make in the next 24 hours. A colleague, a barista, a friend. Now, before you say anything aloud, breathe, slow your heart rate for a moment, and try 2 small shifts. 1. Start with pacing. Mirror their recent words or rhythm for 1 or 2 lines. Repeat back a phrase they used or match their speaking speed. 2. Then lead. Follow with a short, positive suggestion phrase as an invitation rather than a demand. Example: if they ask you whether you can help with a task, you might say, "I hear you. That sounds like it's important. I can take this on tomorrow morning. Would that work?" Notice how the mirroring lowers friction and how the invitational structure reduces reactive resistance. That little experiment demonstrates one core pattern of verbal hypnosis. Align first, then invite. Why practice matters. Verbal hypnosis is not a formula to be memorized and recited like a spell. It's a skill that awakens when you move from mechanical mimicry to intuitive use. Practice grows your sensitivity to timing, to which metaphors land for which people, and to how to slide suggestions into conversation without sounding rehearsed. We'll include short daily drills you can use to build this sensitivity in realistic doses, so your speech becomes adaptive rather than robotic. A note on ethics and consent. I'll teach you verbal nudges and frameworks that influence decision-making. Use them openly. When you're coaching, negotiating, or selling, be transparent about your goals when appropriate. The most durable influence is built on trust. If you repeatedly use these techniques to get short-term wins while harming relationships, your long-term credibility will evaporate. Think of this work as craftsmanship, craft that improves lives and preserves dignity. Finally, a promise. At the end of this book, you will know a compact, surprising principle that ties the whole practice together. A principle that many seasoned communicators recognize intuitively, but rarely name. I'll reveal it, explain why it's both simple and hard, and show you how to use it to bring everything you've learned into fluent action. If you're ready, turn the page. We begin with attention, how to notice it, how to gain it, and how to hold it. You'll learn why certain words act like keys, why silence is sometimes the sharpest tool, and how rhythm and story steer the mind. Above all, you'll learn to speak in ways that are less about pushing people and more about inviting them to step into choices that feel natural and aligned. Let's start, not with tricks, but with respect, curiosity, and practice. Chapter 2. Attention is the currency of conversation. Without it, your best lines evaporate into noise. With it, a single phrase can alter a decision, calm a fear, or light up curiosity. If verbal hypnosis begins with anything, it begins here, noticing where attention is, directing it, and holding it long enough for a suggestion, a question, or an idea to settle. This chapter teaches you practical ways to earn attention and to convert it into influence, not by tricking people, but by speaking in ways that match how human brains naturally pay attention. First, understand what attention looks like. Attention is more than eye contact. It is a cluster of signals, a slow breathing pattern, a micro pause after your sentence, a nick of the head, pupils that focus, the tempo of replies. Often you'll see attention appear as a tiny delay. The listener stops talking or their body relaxes for a moment. If you learn to spot that moment, you can place a thought where it will stick. Practice by watching people in everyday situations, in cafes, on calls, and meetings, and noting the seconds when they stop and listen. Those pauses are where influence is made. Next, get comfortable with the physiology of attention. The autonomic nervous system shifts between fight or flight, and rest and digest modes. High arousal narrows attention and makes people defensive. Calm arousal widens attention and supports openness. Your voice and pacing are direct levers over that system. Speak too fast and breathlessly, and you push the listener into arousal. Speak too slow and flat, and you risk boredom. The trick is controlled variability. A generally calm tone with brief, intentional changes in rhythm and volume. Slow your breathing. Drop your voice slightly on the last word of a sentence. Use a softer volume to invite listeners in. Small shifts in breath and tone change the room. Mirroring is not mimicry. It's alignment. When people hear a rhythm they're familiar with, their brains stop expending energy on decoding and instead listen. Mirroring can be verbal, repeating a phrase they used, matching sentence length, and nonverbal, aligning posture, breathing, or hand gestures. Do it subtly, reflect one or two elements, then lead. For example, if a client says, "I'm overwhelmed with these deadlines," you might reply, "You're overwhelmed, that's a lot." The short repeat validates. The follow-up offers structure. People drop resistance when they feel understood. Pacing and leading is the simplest pattern in verbal hypnosis. Pacing means stating observable truths the listener cannot disagree with, facts about the moment, what they said, or a shared situation. Leading is a gentle guide that follows, a suggestion, question, or invitation that assumes cooperation. Here's a clean pattern. Pace with 3 short, true statements, then lead with an invitation. Example, "You're tired. You've been up late. You want more focus tomorrow. Would a quick planning session now help?" The listener's brain says yes to the facts and then readily entertains the invitation. Language matters. Sensory words, metaphor, and embedded suggestions carry weight. People think in sensory terms, images, sounds, feelings. So when you describe a future choice in sensory detail, it becomes more real. Compare, we could improve sales with imagine closing those calls feeling confident, hearing clients say yes, and seeing your calendar fill. The second paints an experience the listener can simulate, which increases their likelihood to act. Embedded suggestions are short phrases inserted into larger sentences that quietly point to an outcome. Many people find, when they try this, they start to notice easier conversations. The listener hears an observation and the suggestion at once. Silence is a tool, not a gap. After a question or a pointed phrase, allow a beat or two of silence. People hate empty space and often fill it by revealing more than they intended. Use silence strategically after key lines. It lets the listener's mind settle on the idea and often to supply their own reasons why they should agree. Practice pausing for 3 slow breaths after you ask an invitation question. That small pause will feel long to you, but is manageable for most listeners. Pattern interrupt is useful when attention is stuck in resistance. If someone is arguing or shutting down, do something incongruent. Change your rhythm. Tell a short, unexpected story, or use a simple physical shift, stand up, move a hand. The interruption breaks the flow of resistance and creates a fresh moment of attention, but use it sparingly and ethically. The goal is to reset, not to shock. Questions steer without pushing. Closed questions lock choices. Open ones guide thought. Ask curiosity-driven questions that activate internal visualization. What would happen if? How would it feel to? Combine that with presuppositions that assume progress. When you start, how will you tell it's working? Notice how that presupposes a starting point and invites the listener to imagine results. Questions that presuppose are powerful because they plant an implicit frame without command. Stories are attention magnets. When you tell a short story with a character, a struggle, and a small sensory detail, Listeners mentally simulate it. Use compact stories to reframe objections. If a prospect says, "I don't have budget," respond with a brief anecdote. "I worked with a manager last year who worried about that too. He tried one small chain, saw immediate savings, and then had the budget to expand." The story softens the objection by showing a path where the obstacle becomes solvable. Practical drills to build attention work. First, the 1-minute mirror. In daily conversations, take a single sentence the other person uses and reflect it back verbatim before responding. Note how the energy shifts. Second, the 3-pace lead. State 3 observable truths, pause, then offer one invitation. Third, the story swap. Prepare 3 2-sentence stories that reframe common objections you face. Practice delivering each in under 20 seconds. Fourth, silence practice. Ask a simple question and hold your breath for 3 slow counts before speaking. Observe what the listener does. A brief script illustrates combining patterns. Imagine asking a colleague to cover a meeting. "I know you've got a lot on your plate today. Emails to finish, a report due, and that meeting at 3. If you could take the first 30 minutes of this call, I'll handle prep and send you a quick brief beforehand." Would that time work for you? You've paced, acknowledged your situation, offered sensory detail, the brief beforehand, and led with an invitation. The structure lowers friction and increases the chance of yes. Finally, practice with humility. Attention is a fragile, shared resource. Use it to clarify, not to coerce. Notice when listeners show signs of depletion, glazed eyes, short answers, and offer to pause or reschedule. Ethical influence respects limits and builds trust. Over time, as you refine tone, pacing, and timing, you'll notice people listening more, offering clearer answers, and making decisions with less friction. That is the practical promise of mastering attention. Not louder persuasion, but cleaner connection. Keep practicing these patterns until they become natural. Then let curiosity guide how you adapt them to each person you meet. Chapter 3. Words are the bricks of influence. The way you assemble them, what you choose, what you omit, the order you place them in determines whether your speech persuades, soothes, puzzles, or irritates. In verbal hypnosis, words do more than convey meaning. They invite the listener to experience a possibility. This chapter looks closely at the language choices that consistently increase openness and reduce resistance. It's less about memorizing lines and more about learning the textures of speech that feel natural to others' minds. Begin with verbs and images. Verbs are action engines. They move a listener from thought to motion. Weak, abstract verbs improve, do, increase. Ask the brain to fill in fuzzy details. Stronger, sensory verbs feel, notice, see, touch, anchor an idea and experience. Saying, "You'll feel the relief when that task is done," is more compelling than, "This will improve your workload." The first invites a simulation. The second delivers a prognosis. When you want someone to imagine a future state, use verbs that call up senses. Choose sensory adjectives and concrete nouns. The human mind prefers pictures. A clear 5-minute script lands differently than a concise approach. Notice how 5-minute gives a measurable frame, and script suggests structure. Where possible, turn abstractions into precise images. If you're discussing results, avoid vague nouns like success or value without context. Instead, describe what success looks, sounds, or feels like for this person. You'll get 2 fewer interruptions a day, or you'll go into that meeting calm and end with a specific next step. The detail makes the outcome believable. Use presuppositions to steer thought without arguing. A presupposition is a linguistic move that assumes some piece of information as true while you're speaking. For example, when you start using this approach, what will you notice first? Presupposes that the person will start. If you choose to try this presupposes choice in action, presuppositions are subtle and powerful because they reframe the mindset of possibilities without direct commands. Use them ethically. Presuppose positive, plausible changes rather than coercive or deceptive outcomes. Embedded commands are another tool, short, action-oriented phrases hidden inside longer sentences. The trick is to keep the rest of the sentence conversational, so the command slips through naturally. For instance, many people, when they try this, find that they can calm down and focus more quickly. The embedded command, calm down and focus, is present inside a neutral structure, delivered with a slightly softened but confident tone. Embedded commands can nudge attention toward action. They work best when modest and honest, never as a substitute for clear consent. Tag questions and softeners shape compliance. A tag question tacked onto a statement. That would help, wouldn't it? Invites agreement without pressing. Softeners like perhaps, maybe, or a little reduced offensiveness in early stages of persuasion. They signal humility. However, overuse of softeners can sap authority. Use them strategically to lower initial barriers, then shift to clearer, firmer language once rapport is established. Contrast frames revalue options by juxtaposition. If someone resists an idea because of cost, reframe with contrast. Spending a small amount now can avoid a much larger headache later. Contrast helps the brain compare costs and benefits quickly. Another contrast technique is to frame the desired choice as an easy option. You could keep patching the problem, or you could try this simple step that takes 10 minutes. The choice feels clearer when the competing alternatives are stated side by side. Sequencing matters. People like micro-routines. Break requests into small, sequential steps rather than asking for a big jump. First, send me the draft. Second, let's meet for 10 minutes. Third, we'll finalize is easier to accept and finish the project. Sequences create a path the listener can walk down. Each small yes builds momentum toward the larger commitment. Use metaphor judiciously. They reframe complex ideas simply. A well-chosen metaphor turns an abstract struggle into a concrete story the brain can run. Think of your attention like a flashlight. One narrow beam is stronger than a scattered glow, provides an immediately useful image for focus strategies. Metaphors also carry emotional tone. Choose metaphors that match the listener's values and context. Avoid mixed metaphors that confuse rather than clarify. Negatives are tricky. Human brains often encode the affirmative of a negative phrase and overlook the negation. Telling someone don't be nervous often triggers images of nervousness. Better say, feel steady, or notice how calm you are, which states a desired state. When you must use negatives, pair them with clear instructions about what to do instead. Pacing language to personality increases receptivity. Some people prefer direct, facts-first talk. Others respond to warm narrative framing. Observe how your listener speaks and mirror that style initially. Short, clipped sentences for direct communicators, gentle, story-like sentences for reflective ones. Mirroring style at the language level is different from parroting content. It's about matching tempo, complexity, and emotional tone. Ask questions that presuppose a positive outcome to shape the listener's internal rehearsal. Instead of "can you do this?" Try, "how will you tell when this is working?" The latter presupposes implementing the idea and ask the listener to visualize success. People who mentally rehearse success are more likely to behave in ways that bring it about. Keep ethics front and center. Language is a tool. How you sculpt it affects real people. Avoid loaded language that manipulates emotional vulnerabilities. If a technique could plausibly benefit someone by clarifying and aligning options, use it. If it would benefit you at the listener's expense, don't. The strongest, most sustainable influence is built on clarity, fairness, and mutual gain. Practice through microscripts and feedback loops. Pick 3 common conversational moments you face. Asking for time off, making a sales introduction, requesting help, and write a 20 to 40-word script using the techniques above. A sensory verb, a presupposition, a short sequence, and a friendly tag question. Try it aloud, record if possible, and listen for naturalness. After the interaction, note what happened. Did your listener respond more easily? Did you feel authentic? Adjust until the script aligns with both effectiveness and your personal voice. Finally, train your ear. Read people's language back to them subtly to validate and lower resistance. Use their own metaphors occasionally. When someone says, "I'm swamped," replying with "swamped." "Yeah, that feels overwhelming," acknowledges their frame and builds connection. Then pivot. If you could clear one small thing this week, what would it be? The reply presupposes that one small thing can be cleared, making action feel manageable. Words are not tricks, they are invitations. When you choose them with clarity, sensory detail, and ethical intent, they create the conditions for others to choose with more awareness and less friction. Keep practicing the textures of language, verbs, images, presuppositions, sequences, and you'll notice conversations shift from arguments to collaborations, from dead ends to paths forward. Chapter 4. If words are the bricks of influence and attention is the currency, then voice and delivery are the mortar, the subtle material that holds everything together. You can have the most persuasive sentence in the world, but if it's delivered with a flat tone, rushed out like an afterthought, or spoken while you're visibly tense, the sentence will fall flat. This chapter is about the physics of speaking. Breath, tone, tempo, pitch, pauses, and the nonverbal currents that carry meaning beneath the words. Master these, and your language stops being mere information and becomes an experience. Start with breath. Breath is the engine of voice and the easiest lever to control your nervous system. When you breathe shallowly from the chest, you sound tight and anxious. When you breathe slowly into the belly, your voice opens and your tempo naturally slows. Practice a simple breathing habit. 3 deep diaphragmatic breaths before you speak in any important moment. Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold for 1. Exhale for 5. That tiny ritual does 2 powerful things. It reduces your heart rate, and it gives you a natural control over phrasing, because your sentences will align with comfortable breath cycles instead of frantic gasps. Tone shapes meaning more than content does. A phrase like, "That's interesting," can praise, threaten, or dismiss depending on pitch, emphasis, and length. If you want openness, keep your pitch moderate, your tone warm, and your inflection falling slightly at the end of sincere statements. If you want curiosity, and with a gentle upward tilt on your last syllable. If you need authority, lower your pitch slightly and lengthen the final syllable. But beware of caricature, authenticity matters. Don't artificially deepen your voice so much that it sounds forced. Instead, cultivate natural resonance by practicing speaking from your chest rather than your throat. Pacing is a conversational metronome. Fast speech communicates urgency and excitement, but can also pressure and fatigue listeners. Slow speech conveys calm and authority, but can bore if overdone. The skill isn't to pick a fixed tempo, it's to vary it. Use a generally relaxed tempo. Then speed up briefly to convey enthusiasm, and slow down on key ideas so they land. A practical trick. Highlight the most important clause in your sentence by slowing into it and lengthening the vowels slightly. For example, what matters most is clarity. The elongation invites the listener to focus. Pauses are surgical. Silence is where the listener's brain does its work. It fills in meaning, rehearses agreement, or reveals objections. Short, well-placed pauses after a question or a key phrase create a gravitational field for thought. Try a 3-count silence after asking for an opinion. It will feel longer to you than to your listener, and usually produces more considered responses. Also use the pause as punctuation. A soft pause before the payoff creates anticipation. A pause after the payoff lets the idea sink. Pitch variation keeps your listener engaged. Monotone is attention's enemy. You don't need a dramatic opera voice to vary pitch. Small, intentional rises and falls are enough. Practice reading a sentence aloud and deliberately change the pitch of 2 words in it. Notice how the meaning shifts depending on which words you lift. Over time, you'll develop the musicality that makes ordinary sentences memorable. Articulation and pace affect perceived credibility. Mumbling suggests uncertainty. Crisp consonants and clear vowel shapes project confidence. That doesn't mean you must over-enunciate like a newsreader, but you should avoid lazy swallowing of words. A helpful exercise: practice tongue twisters slowly to loosen articulators, then read them at conversational speed. Pay attention to consonants at the ends of words. They're where meaning often sits. Volume signals intention. A louder voice grabs attention but risks sounding aggressive. A softer voice draws people in and requires them to lean forward mentally, which is often exactly what you want when you're introducing a delicate suggestion. Experiment with a technique called soft leading. Reduce your volume by a notch on the key command or invitation phrase. The slight drop forces listeners to tune in and reduces resistance because whispering feels intimate, not coercive. Use this selectively and authentically. Don't whisper at someone across a noisy room. It will come off as odd. Nonverbal delivery is the picture around the sentence. Posture, gestures, facial expression, and eye contact create context that either supports or undermines your words. Open posture, uncrossed arms, slight forward lean, signals approachability. Controlled gestures that mirror your verbal rhythm enhance clarity. Use hands to count steps to show size or to emphasize contrasts. Avoid repetitive, nervous gestures like tapping or hair touching. They leak anxiety. Eye contact should be steady but natural. Aim for a conversational triangle, left eye, right eye, mouth, and use brief, relaxed hold of 2 to 3 seconds. Micro expressions and congruence matter. If your words say, "I understand," but your face tightens, the listener will believe the face. Aim for congruence, emotion and expression that match your language. Practicing in front of a mirror or recording yourself is the fastest way to discover mismatches and recalibrate. Use vocal anchors to create reliable responses. A vocal anchor is a specific phrase delivered with consistent tone that becomes associated in the listener's mind with a feeling or action. For instance, a coach might always say, "and breathe," in a calm, steady voice at the moment of release. Over time, the phrase cues relaxation. The ethical use of anchors is to help people access useful states, calm, focused curiosity, not to manipulate. Choose anchors that are short, sincere, and easily repeatable. Context and environment amplify delivery. Speaking in a noisy hallway will demand clearer enunciation and slightly higher volume. A quiet office allows for softer tones and longer pauses. Adjust your delivery to the environment and to the medium. Phone conversations need more vocal variation since there's no body language. Video calls require good camera framing and eye alignment with the lens to simulate eye contact. Practice routines that actually work. Here are 3 drills. The 5-minute vocal warm-up. Hum gently for 1 minute to vibrate your resonators. Breathe deeply for another minute. Then read 3 short paragraphs aloud, focusing on pitch, movement, pauses, and clear consonants. Do this daily on days you'll be speaking. Record and listen. Record a 5-minute simulated conversation or pitch, then listen back. Mark 3 moments where your tone could be warmer, clearer, or slower. Repeat the segment until the change feels natural. The pause challenge. Have a partner ask you rapid-fire questions for 1 minute. After the minute, respond to each question, but include a 3-count pause before your answer. This strengthens your ability to let silence do the heavy lifting. A simple script shows the power of a line delivery. Imagine calming an anxious colleague about a presentation. You sound worried about tomorrow. Pause. 2 breaths. That's completely understandable. It's important to you. Soften voice. Let's simplify it. 2 main points, a short opening story and a clear ask at the end. Pause. If I help you outline those now, would that ease the pressure? Soft leading on the last clause. Notice the pattern. Acknowledgement, calming pause, soft leading on solution, and an invitational close. The voice choices, warmth, slow tempo, 1 soft lead. Make the structure feel supportive rather than directive. Finally, be patient with progress. Changing how you deliver speech is like learning a musical instrument. It requires curiosity, repetition, and small, focused goals. Start with 1 element, breath or pause or pitch variation, and practice it until it feels natural. Then add another. Over time, your delivery will stop being an add-on and become the default way you show up in conversation. When voice and words move together, your speech becomes memorable, trustworthy, and quietly persuasive. Use that power to create clarity, kindness, and alignment, and you'll find people not only listen, but want to follow. Chapter 5. By now you have a feel for attention, word choice, and delivery. In this chapter, we bring those elements together into pattern techniques you can use in ordinary conversations. I call these practical patterns because they're repeatable, testable, and small enough to practice without feeling like you're acting in a play. Each pattern is a way of arranging pacing, language, and voice, so the listener's mind completes a path you've sketched, not forced, but made easier to travel. We'll cover the most useful patterns: pacing and leading sequences, embedded commands, yes sets, double binds, future pacing, anchoring, and conversational loops. For each, you'll get clear examples and short drills to make them second nature. Pacing and leading is the backbone. It's simple. First, say 3 short truths the listener accepts pacing. Then add a suggestion that points forward leading. The pacing lowers resistance because the brain agrees with the facts. The lead rides that agreement forward. For example, you're busy today, you've read the brief, you care about the outcome. Would you like to take the first slot to present? The 3 facts reduce friction. The invitation assumes cooperation. Use pacing about observable realities, what the person said, the current situation, or a shared fact. Keep the pacing truthful. If it's not accurate, you lose trust quickly. Embedded commands are short action phrases placed inside longer sentences, spoken with a subtle tonal shift, so the command stands out to the unconscious mind without sounding like an order. Example: many people, when they try this, discover they can decide quickly and act. The bolded phrase is a command, wrapped in conversational scaffolding. The trick with embedded commands is to keep them honest and to use a natural emphasis. A slight drop in volume or a change in rhythm is usually enough. Don't overuse them. When used sparingly and sincerely, they guide without coercing. Yes sets build momentum through small agreements. Start with a string of questions or statements that are obvious yes answers. Then follow with your request, a classic sales-oriented yes set. Do you want to save time? Do you want to reduce stress? Do you want predictable results? When a person answers yes repeatedly, even implicitly, their brain becomes primed to continue agreeing. Finish with invitation. Would you like to try the approach that gets those results? This technique works in non-sales contexts, too, in coaching, in parenting, in team meetings. The ethical boundary is clear. Don't manufacture consent. Use yes sets to clarify genuine alignment. Double binds offer limited choices that both lead toward the same outcome. Instead of asking, will you do X? You ask, would you prefer to do X on Monday or Tuesday? Either answer is a commitment. Double binds are effective because they respect autonomy while redirecting decision-making from whether to when. Use them when the main barrier is procrastination or indecision rather than outright refusal. Avoid them when the listener truly needs a free, open choice. The point is to simplify, not to corner. Future pacing invites the listener to simulate a positive outcome. You ask them to imagine how things will look, feel, or sound after a change. Imagine 2 weeks from now, you open your inbox and find fewer follow-ups. What's the first thing you'll notice? The brain rehearses the future as if it were real, increasing the likelihood of behaviors that make it happen. Combine future pacing with sensory language and verbs. Feel the relief, hear their responses, see the empty task list. Sensory detail is what makes future scenarios credible. Anchoring creates a link between a stimulus, a word, tone, touch, and a state, calm, confidence, focus. In conversational hypnosis, anchors are lightweight and ethical. A repeated phrase in a consistent tone, a deliberate breath, or a short gesture. For example, a leader might always say, let's pause in a calm, grounded tone before a difficult conversation. Over time, that phrase cues composure. To build an anchor, evoke a strong, genuine state in the other person through recall or guided imagery. Apply a short, distinct marker, a word or touch at the peak of that state. Repeat several times across different contexts. Use anchors to help people access resourceful states, not to trigger unwanted responses. Conversational loops are a gentle way to keep someone engaged and thinking. Ask a question, then add a presupposition that the question will be answered later. For instance, what would you change about this process? And when you tell me, we'll note the first step. The loop invites thought now and assumes that the solution will be shared. Loops are especially helpful in group facilitation and coaching because they surface ideas without forcing immediate decision. A few microscripts show these patterns together. Pacing plus embedded command plus future pacing. You reviewed the proposal, you know the risks, and you care about results. Decide to act now and imagine the team celebrating that win next quarter. Yes set plus double bind. Would you like this rolled out in phases or all at once? Either way will set clear metrics. Anchor plus pause plus invitation. Take a breath with me. Pause. Notice how your shoulders drop. When you're ready, share one change you'd like to test. Practice drills are essential. Try these quick exercises 3 times this week. The 3 truths drill. In low-stakes chats, coffee lines, small talk, practice saying 3 true, observable statements about the present moment, then add a small leading question. Note the change in openness. Embedded command warm-up. Write 5 sentences you might say in ordinary conversations. In each, insert a 2 to 3 word embedded command. Say the sentence aloud, emphasizing the embedded command with a subtle tonal shift. Record or ask a friend for feedback on naturalness. Future pacing visualization. Ask someone a neutral question, and then follow with a 2-sentence future pacing scenario using sensory details. Notice whether they pause longer and whether their language shifts toward planning. Anchor building. Ethical with a willing partner. Guide them to recall a time they felt calm and confident. At the peak, say a short word or phrase in a consistent tone. Repeat twice more after a few minutes. Test the anchor by using a phrase and observing whether a hint of that state returns. A word on conversational trance. Many people enter a light, receptive state during good conversation, relaxed, focused, and open to suggestion. This is not mind control. It's simply the natural state of being absorbed. Your job is to use that state responsibly. Clarify, aid decision-making, and present options that genuinely benefit the listener. If your techniques begin to feel manipulative to you, stop. Influence that undermines autonomy or capitalizes on vulnerability is not persuasion. It's exploitation. Use feedback loops. After trying a pattern, ask for metafeedback. How did that feel? Or was that helpful? People often appreciate the transparency and will tell you if a phrase landed oddly. Adjust accordingly. The best communicators iterate based on others' responses, not on dogma. Finally, remember that patterns are tools, not identities. Don't become the person who only uses the tricks. Blend the techniques with curiosity, humor, and humility. The most persuasive voices are human first, fallible, curious, and tuned into the other person's needs. Use these patterns to make choices easier, not to replace good judgment. Keep practicing, and you'll find everyday conversations becoming more fluid, less fraught, and more likely to end with real agreement rather than reluctant compliance. Chapter 6. Resistance is a human reflex that keeps us safe, a small alarm that says, "Wait, is this for me?" If you treat resistance like an enemy to be crushed, you'll win short battles and lose long-term trust. If you learn to work with it, resistance becomes a guide, a map of what the other person values, fears, or misunderstands. This chapter is about listening to that map and using verbal hypnosis to lower defensiveness, transform objections into options, and open space for cooperation. We'll cover recognition, reframing, paradoxical invitations, softening language, and conflict-calming scripts you can use right away. First, recognize resistance early. It rarely arrives as a blunt no. More often as a cluster of signals, a tightening in the voice, a short answer, a smile that doesn't reach the eyes, a sudden change of topic, or a repetition of the same objection. Learn to be curious about these micro-closures. When someone repeats a reason they can't, that repetition is a threshold. Behind it lies an emotional barrier. Your job is to explore that threshold without demolishing it. Ask gentle, clarifying questions that invite elaboration, not confrontation. A simple non-confrontational prompt. Help me understand what's behind that concern. Often opens a more candid answer than pushing harder. The first verbal move is validation, not agreement. People want to feel heard before they are open to change. Validation sounds like, "I can see why that would bother you," or "That makes sense given what you've been through." Note, validation is not the same as capitulation. You can validate the feeling without agreeing with the conclusion. This lowers the listener's alarm and makes them more receptive to reframe. Use a calm tone and a short pause after your validation. The pause gives the other person space to soften. Reframing is the mental judo of language. A reframe doesn't deny the objection. It changes the angle for which the problem is seen. Suppose a client says, "I don't have budget." A reflexive salesperson might rebut with discounts or facts. A reframing approach acknowledges and redirects. Budget is tight. That's exactly why small experiments are useful. They let you test with minimal risk. The reframe connects the objection to a different value. Risk avoidance becomes cautious experimentation. Successful reframes are true, simple, and directly address the emotional subtext of the objection. Use a two-step reframe when resistance is strong. Step 1. Reflect the objection, short, accurate. Step 2. Add a presupposition that makes the objection compatible with action. Example, you're worried about cost, and we can structure this so you only pay when you see a clear improvement. The presupposition, we can structure this, shifts the frame from an either slash or problem to a solvable design question. Paradoxical invitations disarm clever resistance. When people dig in because they feel pressured, offering a choice that seems to confirm their objection can actually relieve the pressure and produce movement. For instance, maybe this isn't the right time. Would you prefer I check back in 3 months or 6? The implied permission to decline reduces the need to defend. Paradoxical language must be used lightly and sincerely. Overuse sounds manipulative. Softening language reduces the fight or flight trigger. Swap blunt commands or invitational phrasing. Instead of do this, say would you consider, or what we tried, softeners like perhaps, often, and a small step lower the threshold for engagement. Pair softeners with clarity so they don't become wishy-washy. Perhaps we could start with a single 20-minute experiment next week to see if it helps. The softener reduces pressure. The clarity reduces ambiguity. When emotions run high, rely on neutrality and grounding. If a conversation escalates, slow your voice, lower your pitch slightly, and lengthen pauses. Provide a brief summary of what you've heard. You're upset about the deadline change and how it affects your team. Then offer a next step. Can we pause for a minute and list the top 2 impacts so we can address them? This combination of calm, summary, and a concrete next step lowers physiological arousal and shifts the interaction from conflict to problem solving. Use control concessions to move the conversation forward. A small, honest concession signals fairness and often prompts reciprocity, but don't give away core value. Concede on peripheral points to gain traction on essentials. Example, I can see adjusting the rollout timing would help. I can shift our support resources if you commit to the pilot. The concession is real and limited. The reciprocal ask anchors progress. Turn objections into options with open-ended reframes. Instead of answering, we don't have bandwidth with a defensive promise, ask, if bandwidth were available, what would you try first? That presupposes possibility and invites a listener to imagine solutions rather than merely defend constraints. People who imagine a path forward are more likely to take the initial step, even if it's small. Scripts are useful tools, not crutches. Here are 3 short scripts you can adapt. Say them with calm delivery, pause, and a validating tone. Script A, the reflect and narrow. I hear you. The timeline feels impossible. Pause. Let's be practical. What's one single deliverable we could shift to make the rest feasible? This reflects feeling, then narrows to an actionable micro-decision. Script B, the offer control. You're right to be cautious. Pause. Would you prefer I draft 2 alternatives? One quick and small, one more comprehensive, and you choose which to test. This gives agency and reduces perceived risk. Script C, the value swap. I get the budget concern. Pause. If we can increase budget, would reallocating 1 hour from these weekly meetings for a month be acceptable to run a short test? This swaps cost for time and invites practical compromise. Practice drills will make these moves reflexive. Try the objection journal for a week. After any conversation where you face resistance, jot one sentence about the objection, your initial response, and one thing you could say next time using validation or reframing. Review at week's end to spot patterns. Also practice the pause and summarize drill with a partner. Let them state an objection for 60 seconds, then respond only with a 15-word summary of validating line and one question. Timing constraints force concision and calm. A word about ethical guardrails. Resistance often indicates vulnerability. If someone resists because they're confused, anxious, or rushed, your job as an influencer is to protect autonomy, not exploit it. Always offer clear exits. If this feels off at any point, tell me and we'll stop. That short sentence protects trust while keeping the door open for honest dialogue. Finally, cultivate patience. People rarely change stance fully in one exchange. Influence is a conversation across time. Small clarifications, consistent respect, and honest scaffolding accumulate. When you approach resistance as information rather than opposition, you turn conflict into collaboration. Practice the scripts, note what softens, and learn to match your pace to the other person's readiness. Over time, you'll find fewer slammed doors and more doors opening to real choices, the kind that people step through willingly. Chapter 7. Questions are the tools that open minds. A well-placed question does more than solicit information. It lights a path inside the listener's head and invites them to walk it. In verbal hypnosis, questions are not interrogation. They are guided discovery. They move people from defensive positions to problem-solving stances, from abstract objections to concrete next steps, and from passive listeners to active collaborators. This chapter teaches you how to ask questions that steer gently, reveal hidden barriers, and help people generate their own reasons to change. Begin by distinguishing three broad functions of questions: information, exploration, and commitment. Information questions gather facts. What deadline are we working toward? Exploration questions invite imagination or reappraisal. What would it look like if that problem didn't exist? Commitment questions move toward action. When could you start? Each function uses different framing and tone. Mixing them poorly creates confusion. Sequencing them well produces momentum. Know the difference between open and closed questions, and use each intentionally. Closed questions, yes/no or choice questions, are great for confirming facts and closing decisions. Would you like on Monday or Tuesday? Open questions, how, what, who, when, where, invite thinking and narrative. What would success look like for you? A common mistake is using closed questions too early, which shuts down thought. Start with open, exploratory questions to map the person's world. Use closed questions once you want clarity or commitment. Presuppositional questions are a subtle powerhouse. They assume aspect of the outcome in their wording, and by doing so, prime the listener to imagine that outcome. Instead, can you improve this process? Ask, when you improve this process, what will change first? The presupposition, when you improve, shifts the frame from possibility to near certainty. Use these to nudge internal rehearsal, but avoid presuppositions that are unrealistic or dishonest. They must feel plausible to the listener. The Socratic sequence is a classic for good reason. It's a gentle chain of questions that leads the other person to discover inconsistencies in their thinking or to articulate a better plan. Start with clarifying facts. What do you see as the main obstacle? Then probe assumptions. What assumptions would have to be true for that obstacle to remain? Then explore alternatives. If those assumptions were false, what could you try instead? Finish with commitment. Which of those options feels most doable this week? The sequence is powerful because it preserves the listener's agency. They produce the solution while you guide the direction. Use scaling questions to calibrate intensity and commitment. Asking on a scale from 1 to 10, how important is this change? Forces quantification and often reveals gaps between stated beliefs and emotional investment. Follow with what would move you 1 point higher. That follow-up turns an abstract number into a practical lever. Scaling is particularly useful in coaching and negotiation to identify where motivation and barriers truly sit. Hypothetical and future-oriented questions create cognitive rehearsal. When someone imagines a future scenario in sensory detail, their brain treats it as a rehearsal that increases the chance of actual behavior. Imagine it's 3 months from now, and this has worked. What do you notice first? Then pause and let them paint sensory detail. Combine this with embedded commands and sensory verbs to make the future feel real. See how calm your team is. Notice the fewer emails. Feel the relief. The more vivid, the stronger the pull toward action. Beware leading questions that close off honesty. A leading question guides a respondent to a particular answer. Don't you agree this is the best option? They can be useful to build momentum when rapport is strong, but used prematurely, they can create resistance or false agreement. Instead, prefer indirect presuppositions and curiosity-driven probes that invite authentic responses. Listen for the hidden but. People often answer questions with an initial yes or description, and then add a caveat that contains a true barrier. For example, I like the idea, but we don't have a budget. When you hear the but, treat it as the real beginning of conversation. Use a question that explores a caveat. Help me understand the budget constraints. What would need to change to make a small test possible? That question reframes the caveat into a solvable design problem. Conversational pacing with questions builds momentum. Ask 3 mild, easily answered questions, yes said. Then 1 deeper question that requires imagination or commitment. Example, do you want faster onboarding? Do you want fewer support tickets? Do you want happier users? What is 1 small change we could try this week to move the needle? The first 3 secure agreement. The last invites concrete action. Use questions to transfer responsibility. People are more likely to act when they own the reasoning. Instead of telling someone what to do, ask them to decide. Which option would you take if you had full control over the timeline? Ownership increases follow-through because it ties a decision to the person's sense of agency rather than to external pressure. Practice question drills to build fluency. Try the 3-question map. Pick a recurring conversational situation, a stalled project update, a sales call, a family chore negotiation. Prepare 3 questions in the following order: a clarifying fact question, an exploration/presuppositional question, and a commitment question. Use them in your next interaction of that type, and notice the difference in how the conversation flows. Another drill is the pause and scale. After asking an open question, pause for 3 slow breaths before they answer. If their answer is vague, follow with a scaling probe. On a scale from 1 to 10, how certain are you about that? The pause increases cognitive space. The scale forces specificity. Short scripts show useful patterns. Use them, then adapt, clarify, and commit. What's the single result you most want from this project? Pause. If you could secure that result, what's the first step you'd take? Reframe and explore. You mentioned budget constraints. What would a very small, low-cost test look like that would give us information? Future pace and anchor. Imagine 2 months from now. The new approach is working. What do you see? Pause. When you notice that, what will you do differently tomorrow? Ethics of questioning matters. Questions can nudge, but they can also lead or manipulate, if used to manufacture consent. Ask yourself whether your questions are helping the other person clarify their values and options, or whether they are serving primarily to get you what you want. If the latter, pause and reframe the question more openly. Finally, cultivate curious tone and authentic interest. The same question asked with genuine curiosity opens doors. Asked with impatience, it slams them shut. Practice maintaining a tone of exploration, not interrogation. Over time, finely tuned questions will become your most reliable way to trigger useful insights in others, not by telling them what to think, but by helping them think differently. Chapter 8. This chapter moves from technique to terrain. All the patterns you've learned so far, pacing and leading, embedded commands, anchors, future pacing, careful delivery, and question sequencing, become most powerful when applied in real contexts. Negotiations, leadership conversations, coaching and mentoring, sales, teaching, and conflict resolution. Each context has its own rhythms, constraints, and ethics. So the skill is less about inventing new tricks than about adapting your core tools to fit the situation. Here I'll show you how to map verbal hypnosis patterns to common scenarios, give brief scripts you can adapt, and suggest tiny practices to build reliability under pressure. Negotiation is choreography disguised as argument. The usual mistake is to treat negotiation as a contest to be won. A better frame is problem solving under constraint. Start negotiations by establishing facts everyone accepts 3 pacings. Then seek small commitments that build toward larger trade-offs. Use double binds to move from whether to when, and anchor cooperative states early. For instance, begin a negotiation by saying in a calm tone, "We both want this project to succeed. The timeline is tight and cost matters. Would you prefer we prioritize scope or quality in the first phase?" You've paced shared goals, acknowledged constraints, and offered a choice that steers the outcome. When objections appear, validate first. "I hear the cost concern." Pause. "What will a lower cost pilot look like from your perspective?" That question reframes the objection into design work. In sales, the ethical line should be bright and visible. Your persuasion must serve a genuine fit between product and customer. Use yes sets early to clarify pain. Would you like fewer support calls? Faster onboarding? Lower churn? Each yes builds alignment. Then future pace. Imagine 3 months from now your support queue is shorter and initial feedback is positive. What would that free up for your team? Sensory future pacing makes the benefit concrete. Close with a simple double bind. Shall we get started with the pilot on Monday or Wednesday? The language assumes a decision while still giving control. Leaders use verbal hypnosis to create alignment and to reduce friction at scale. In a team meeting, use pacing to validate current realities, then anchor a shared state before introducing change. For example, we've all been stretched this quarter. The team's dedication shows, and we want better focus. Let's take a 5-minute reset so we can plan the next sprint clearly. Pause, lead the reset by inviting one breath together, and then present a small sequence of actions. Leaders who habitually soften and then sequence requests, small first steps, measurable metrics, review points, build trust because they reduce perceived risk for followers. Use conversational loops and recurring check-ins. Ask, "What's the one thing you'll try this week? And when you tell me next Monday, we'll see what changed?" The loop makes follow-up natural and normal. Coaches and mentors work with interchange, and verbal hypnosis here is about eliciting autonomy. Rather than telling someone what to do, use Socratic sequences, scaling questions, and future pacing to let them discover their own path. A clean coaching line. What would success look like for you in 30 days? Pause. On a scale of 1 to 10, how ready do you feel to take that first step? If readiness is low, ask what would move you 1 point higher, and then frame a micro-experiment. Will you commit to a 5-minute practice 3 times this week? Small, measurable commitments compound. Use anchors to help clients access resource states in session, but always teach them how to use the anchor themselves afterwards. Teaching and training benefit from rhythm and story. Introduce new material with 3 brief true statements that build curiosity, pacing. Tell a short story that models the application. Then ask a question that presupposes learning. After you try this in practice, what will you notice first? Use group scaling questions to assess readiness and break content into tiny experiments that learners can test quickly. Feedback loops are essential. After each practice, invite meta-feedback. How did that feel? And future pace the next small step. Conflict resolution is where the ethics of verbal hypnosis is most visible. When stakes and emotions are high, slow down. Begin with validation and a short summary of the other's position. You're upset about X because it affects Y. Pause, then state a neutral framing. We both want to avoid further harm and find a workable path. Use a control concession if appropriate, and then present two modest options double-bind that lead toward repair. If the other party remains agitated, move to physiological regulation. Slow your voice and bite a breath, and propose a short break. Remember that trust repairs more slowly than it breaks. Keep offers transparent and reversible. Virtual communication intensifies delivery challenges. On phone or video, you lose many nonverbal cues, so your voice and questions must carry more to load. Compensate by using more explicit pacing. I understand this is urgent. More frequent pauses to invite response, and clear anchors, a consistent phrase you use at transitions. In video calls, align your camera and show congruent posture. In audio-only calls, increase your pitch variation and intentionality in pauses. When writing email, use future pacing and sequencing to avoid ambiguity. Short bullets, clear next steps, and a closing double bind, with Thursday morning or Friday afternoon work for quick check. Cultural and interpersonal sensitivity matters more than any technique. Language patterns resonate differently across cultures, ages, and personalities. Some cultures prefer directness. Others value indirect, consensus-building phrasing. Match the communication style you use to the person you're with. Watch for rhythm, formality, and the metaphors they use, and mirror those elements. When unsure, default to humility and curiosity. Ask, how would you prefer we handle this? Rather than imposing a familiar pattern. Measure what matters. Influence is not about clever lines. It's about outcomes and relationships. Track small metrics. How often requests are accepted, time to decision, the tone of follow-up emails, or the number of reopened issues after negotiation. Use those data points to refine phrasing and pacing. Keep a short influence log for a month. Note one successful conversation and one that didn't go well. Record what techniques you use and identify one change to try next time. Finally, practice with real accountability. Role play with a friend or colleague, but do it in short, realistic bursts. Use a 2-minute negotiation drill. Set a realistic, low-stakes scenario. Spend 90 seconds pacing and asking 2 presuppositional questions, then close with double bind. Swap roles and give brief feedback on tone, timing, and authenticity. Repeat the drill until your delivery feels natural and your language fits the context instead of feeling like a formula. Applied verbal hypnosis is not a bag of reusable lines. It's a set of calibrated moves that respect autonomy, context, and relationship. In negotiation, lead toward mutual gain. In leadership, reduce perceived risk and sequence small wins. In coaching, elicit ownership. In conflict, protect dignity and pause for repair. Across these contexts, your most valuable asset is not the perfect sentence, but your capacity to listen, adapt, and act with ethical clarity. Use these applications as templates, not scripts, and let the person across from you teach you how to speak to them. Chapter 9. Up to now, you've learned the building blocks: attention, language, voice, patterns, questions, resistance handling, and context. This chapter is where those pieces become a fluent skill, not because you memorize more tricks, but because you learn to weave them together, personalize them, and manage the responsibilities that come with influence. Mastery in verbal hypnosis is both creative and ethical. Creative because you must improvise with real people in real time. Ethical because the stakes of persuasion are human lives and relationships. Here I'll give you the map for integration, how to combine techniques into a coherent style, how to make practice sustainable, how to troubleshoot common breakdowns, and how to hold yourself accountable so influence stays constructive rather than corrosive. Integration starts with a simple checklist you can carry mentally into any conversation. Notice attention, pace with truth, lead with an invitation, set a clear next step, and check for consent. This short sequence keeps your interventions humane. Notice attention first. Is a person present or distracted? If distracted, earn attention with a quick mirror or a sensory phrase. Pace with 3 short, observable truths before you ask for anything meaningful. Lead with a question or an embedded command that presupposes choice rather than demanding it. Finish by proposing one small, reversible next step and asking permission to follow up. That structure converts technique into habit, and habit into a consistent style that others learn to expect from you. Personalization is a core creative task. Techniques are generic. People are not. Listen for the metaphors they use, the tempo they prefer, and the values behind their words. Safety, freedom, mastery, fairness. If someone uses work metaphors like pipeline and deliverables, you can speak in sequence steps and metrics. If someone talks in relational terms, tell short stories and use soft leading language. Keep a simple mental model of 3 conversational types you most often encounter: the direct, the reflective, and the skeptical, and prepare one micro pattern for each. For the direct person, short pacing statements followed by a double bind. For the reflective, a story, a presuppositional question, and time to think. For the skeptical, validation, a small concession, then a low-risk pilot. Over time, you'll stop applying scripts and start composing in the moment. Practice deliberately and compactly. Mastery grows from repetition with feedback, not from long theoretical sessions. Carve out 5 minutes twice a day for a focused drill, a 90-second role play, a 2-sentence future pacing, or a voice warm-up that emphasizes a single pitch move. Keep a short practice log, 1 line per interaction. Where you tried, 1 outcome metric, yes/no, pause/argued, and 1 tweak for next time. After 2 weeks, you'll notice patterns in what works and what doesn't. That small loop of action, reflection, adjustment is the engine of improvement. Troubleshooting common breakdowns keeps momentum. If your language sounds rehearsed, slow down and add a genuine observation before your technique. A short phrase about the room, the weather, or their last comment. If people agree but fail to act, your commitment question might be too vague. Add a specific when and how in a tiny microstep. Can you do this by Thursday for 10 minutes? If resistance escalates into anger, step back, validate, pause, and offer a reversible option. We can pause here and revisit when it's calmer. If you notice people avoiding you after attempted influence, that's a red flag you're overusing covert moves. Switch to explicit transparency. I'm trying a new way of structuring requests. Tell me if it feels off. Ethics is not a chapter you read once. It's a calibration you run constantly. Ask yourself 3 quick questions before any influence move. Is this in the other person's interest? Would I want this done to me? Am I preserving their autonomy? If the answer is ever no or maybe, don't proceed without reframe and consent. Influence that improves lives is durable. Influence that exploits short-term leverage destroys trust over time. Keep visible exits in your proposals. If you'd rather not, we'll stop, no harm done. That simple rule both protects people and preserves your credibility. Advanced chaining and timing make your interventions more powerful without being louder. Chaining means linking small requests across time, so each one builds momentum toward a larger change. Start with a micro commitment, something that takes less than 5 minutes, and tie it into the next small step through conversational loops and scheduled follow-up. Time those requests to natural milestones. Finish a meeting in a day or Monday morning. Use anchors at key transition points, a phrase, a breath, so people learn the rhythm of progress. But never chain past the other person's willingness. Monitor signals and be ready to slow down. Media adaptation matters. The same pattern that works in a face-to-face meeting will need recalibration for email, text, or video. In writing, future pacing and sequencing become bullets and subject lines. Short, sensory preview lines and a clear one-action CTA. In voice-only calls, add more pitch variation and explicit pacing statements. On video, align vocal timing with facial micro-expressions so your embedded commands land congruently. Build a small template for each medium you use most often. 2 subject line formulas for emails, a 3-sentence opener for calls, and a 20-second anchor phrase for video transitions. Cultivate signature moves that feel like you. Master communicators aren't robotic. They have a recognizable cadence or phrase that becomes a trust anchor. It might be a grounded breath before you ask for commitment, a clarifying question you always use, or a brief story you tell when explaining change. Make your signature move both ethical and dependable, something that helps others orient rather than manipulates them. Over time, consistency builds expectations and lowers friction. Measure outcomes beyond immediate yes. Track relational metrics. Do people follow up willingly? Does conflict resolve faster? Do meetings end with clear ownership? The true marker of skill is not how often you get a short-term agreement, but whether relationships deepen and decisions improve. Keep 3 measurements for a month and review them. 1. Acceptance rate of small asks. 2. Time to follow through. 3. Quality of post-interaction feedback. Use those numbers to refine your phrasing and pacing. Finally, sustain humility. The more skilled you become, the greater the temptation to believe you can steer any person anywhere. Resist that. The best practitioners are those who combine curiosity with restraint, who prefer questions over control, and who prize long-term trust over single victories. Influence used well increases other people's agency. Influence used poorly replaces it. Let your practice be a craft in service of others' flourishing. To close this chapter, try a short integration exercise. For the next week, pick one real-world conversation daily, a check-in with a colleague, a quick ask of a friend, a brief client call. Before each, run the 5-step checklist. Notice attention. Pace 3 truths. Leave with an invitation. Propose a small step. Check consent. After each interaction, jot 1 sentence about what changed. Over 7 days, you'll see how small, consistent integration turns isolated techniques into a personal, ethical skill set that works in the messy flow of real life. Mastery is not a secret principle at the end. It is a slow accumulation of small, honest practices. Chapter 10. You started this book to speak, so people would listen, not to dominate, but to be heard, to move ideas, to help others choose more clearly. By now you have a toolkit. How to notice and hold attention. How to choose words that invite rather than shove. How to shape voice and timing so meaning lands. And how to weave patterns, pacing, embedded commands, anchors, future pacing questions into real conversations. You've learned how to calm resistance, how to ask questions that open doors, and how to map these tools to negotiations, leadership, coaching, and everyday life. This final chapter stitches those parts into a whole and gives you the single principle that pulls the practice together. The surprising, compact principle is this: Influence is an invitation, not an imposition. Say it again. Influence is an invitation. That phrase carries three simple implications: permission, path, and momentum, and together they form practice's beating heart. Permission. Always begin by securing psychological space. People respond to invitations when they feel seen and safe. The simplest way to create that safety is to pace first. Reflect what's obvious and true about the person or situation. Then ask rather than tell. That small sequence, validate, invite, does more to lower resistance than any rhetorical flourish. Permission is ethical. It preserves autonomy and builds a relationship that lasts longer than a single win. Path. Once someone is softened, provide a clear, tiny path forward. Vague asks create paralysis. Small, sequence steps create momentum. Use double binds, micro commitments, and future pacing to map the next few footsteps. The path should be plausible and reversible. A trivial pilot, a 10-minute trial, a one-question survey. People will travel farther when each step is clear, predictable, and low risk. Momentum, influence compounds. Each small yes makes the next yes easier. Use yes sets, anchors, and conversational loops to build reliable chains of action. But momentum without consent becomes manipulation. Keep the chain visible and give exit points. Momentum is a partnership. You're co-authoring a sequence of choices, not setting a trap. These three elements, permission, path, momentum, are the lens through which every technique in this book should be judged. When you practice a pacing and leading script, ask, does it secure permission? When you use an embedded command, ask, does it offer a clear path? When you build an anchor, ask, does it create momentum toward a genuinely useful state? Run each move through these three filters, and your influence will be effective and humane. A short checklist to carry with you. Pause and notice attention. Pace with truth, 3 small facts. Invite, question, embedded command, or anchor. Offer a small, reversible path, microstep. Check consent and schedule follow-up. Do this enough times and it becomes reflexive, a natural rhythm you use without thinking. 7 practical habits to make the principle real. Daily 2-minute warm-up. Before any important conversation, take 2 minutes. Breathe, identify one truth to pace, and decide on a single tiny step you'll request. The warm-up orients you and reduces nervousness. The micro-commitment habit. Break every request into something that takes 5 minutes or less. If that's not possible, ask for permission to propose a 5-minute start. Small commitment scale. The 3 truths rule. Start every persuasive exchange with 3 observable truths. It grounds the other person and earns permission to proceed. Record and reflect. Once a week, jot down one conversation that worked and one that didn't. Note what you paced, what path you offered, and whether momentum followed. Learn fast. Anchor with care. Choose one ethical anchor phrase or small ritual, a shared breath, a sign-off line, and use it consistently to cue useful states. Teach others the anchor, if appropriate. The release clause. When proposing action, always include a short, respectful exit option. If this doesn't feel right, tell me and we'll stop. Saying the exit out loud paradoxically increases compliance because it honors agency. Schedule revisits. Influence is often a conversation across time. Schedule visible check-ins that make the chain of micro-commitments natural and expected. Ethical compact. A short promise to yourself. Influence without ethics ruins people and reputations. Make this compact your practice's moral core. I will use my skills to clarify choices, protect autonomy, and pursue mutual benefit. If my work benefits me at another's measurable cost, I will stop and reframe. Repeat it before major conversations until it feels bodily true. Troubleshooting final notes. If people start to avoid you, audit your moves. Are you overusing embedded commands, anchors, or yes sets in ways that feel covert? If so, switch to transparency. Say, I want to help move us forward. May I suggest a small test? If resistance spikes into anger, remember the physical first aid. Slow your voice, validate, and offer a clear, small next step or pause. When techniques sound rehearsed, add authenticity. A personal anecdote, a modest admission, or a simple observation about the room. Techniques are scaffolding. The human you bring is the architecture, where to go from here. The rest of your practice is iterative and social. Teach one person a micro pattern and invite them to practice with you. Build a tiny influence lab with a colleague or friend. 10-minute role plays, 1-minute scripts, and honest feedback. Over weeks, you'll notice patterns. What metaphors land, which tempos suit which types of people, how cultural context shifts framing. Keep the data simple and the iteration fast. One last small experiment. For the next 7 days, pick one conversation a day where you intentionally use a permission path momentum sequence. Keep each interaction short and reversible. Afterward, note one sentence, what you paced, what micro step you proposed, and whether momentum followed. At the end of the week, review the 7 lines and pick one thing to repeat next week. Closing encouragement. Verbal hypnosis is not a toolkit for trickery. It's a craft for humane influence. It asks you to be present, curious, and honest. It invites you to notice attention. Choose words that create pictures. Shape voice to match intent. And design paths small enough for people to walk. Used well, it reduces friction, increases clarity, and deepens relationships. Used poorly, it erodes trust. Your responsibility is the deciding factor. Go forward with care. Practice with humility. Keep asking, is this in their interest? And let that question be your true north. If you do, you'll find speaking becomes less about getting people to do what you want and more about helping them choose what served them best. And that, in the end, is the most persuasive thing of all.